ended. So it's recording. My name's Duvi Sanchez. I'm the Assistant Director of Recruitment for the Graduate School's Office of Education. And today we're doing a hidden curriculum series called Grad School 101. So our hidden curriculum series is happening all week. We'll have different presentations tailored to the graduate school process. But today's session is exactly how it sounds, pretty general on if you're applying to graduate school. So some of this information you can take for all of our programs. Some of this information you can take to even applying to other schools or other programs as well. So if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, feel free to put it in the chat. I am joined today by one of our student ambassadors, Russell. So Russell's here to help make sure all of your questions are answered. So throughout today's presentation, please feel free to drop any questions that you might have, and Russell will help me get those questions answered. But let's get started on Grad School 101. Okay, so here's what's on our agenda today. We'll be talking about how to know if a program is a good fit for you, preparation and requirements to applying to graduate school, tuition costs, funding and opportunities, tips for grad school, and then resources. So in the Graduate School of Education, we have over 90 programs among our 4 departments. So our 4 departments are our counseling school and educational psychology. That department prepares students to work with individuals, groups, and agencies to resolve problems and enhance development. We offer a variety of accredited programs for that department, resulting in doctoral and master's degrees in psychology, counseling, and any other special research areas that might be applicable to that department. There's going to be a few master programs listed here to help you prepare for licensure. So once we get further on in the presentation, I can go over which programs are specific to which department. But some of them that you might be considering if you're looking for licensure in New York State in the counseling school and educational psychology department would be our mental health counseling master's program, our school counseling. We have a school psychology master's and advanced certificate. We have rehabilitation counseling, and we have some doctoral programs like our counseling, psychology, and school psychology. Then we have the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy. So this department prepares students to take leadership roles as scholars, administrators, and policy analysts who positively impact educational organizations. So that can be nationally and internationally. So students gain an understanding of how and why successful policy making and leadership is important, whether that's in schools, school districts, or even in a college setting. Then we have the Department of Learning and Instruction. So this is devoted to educating teachers. So if you're ever interested in becoming a New York State certified teacher or teaching, it would be in the Department of Learning and Instruction. Then we have our Department of Information and Library Science. So this is devoted to educating library and informational professionals. We have a lot of online options in that department. So if your student is interested in an online program, all of our programs in the Information Science department are online. Some of them are also completely asynchronous, meaning there's no set time for your courses, but we'll go into that later on. All right. So now that you know a little bit about our departments and what kind of programs we offer, this slide is just to give you a preview of some of the different career paths that our programs lead to. So we have over 90 programs. It can be hard to kind of go over all 90 of them today, but this is kind of to give you an idea of the jobs that you can do after you've completed one of our programs. So we have a higher ed program, we have a master's and a doctoral program, so you can always go on to be a higher ed professional. If you want to be an educational administrator, so if you want to become a principal, if you're already a teacher, we have that program. If you're interested in counseling, like I said, there's mental health, rehabilitation counseling, school psychologists. So these are just some overall ideas. For example, we have programs that lead to specifically becoming a certified teacher in New York State. So as a New York State individual who wants to become a teacher, you do have to get certified and go through a certification program to teach in a public school. Some students say, oh, well, what if I go into private schooling? That might be different, but to work in a New York State public school, you do have to be certified through a program. Awesome. So the next step is talking about preparation. So when I'm thinking about applying to graduate school, I know as a student like me, so I was the first in my family to go to graduate school, and I didn't know how to really prepare myself for that graduate school process. So today I'm just going to be doing some pretty broad tips to help you with that process. You can take anything that I say and apply it to programs that you're pursuing. Some of it might only pertain to graduate school of education at UB, so I will try to be specific on what might pertain to our school and what might differ at other schools. When preparing to go to graduate school, I always tell my students to do your online research. So we know that you're looking at other schools, and that's perfectly okay. That's part of the process. But you want to make sure you're keeping track of all the information that you're getting from those other schools. So I know when I was applying to graduate school, I created a checklist. I'm a big Excel person, so I had an Excel checklist and I listed all the schools that I was applying to, and I put in the information on the spreadsheet of things that I needed to know. So some helpful things are the requirements for each program. Some schools might differ. Some might require the GRE. Some might not require the GRE. For example, at the Graduate School of Education, we don't require the GRE for any of our programs, so you don't need to worry about that. Some schools might have differing deadlines. So if you're applying to one of our doctoral programs, those deadlines come pretty quickly. They're usually in December or January. But if you're applying to a master's program, you might have some more time. You might have until February. But keeping track of those deadlines and those requirements are very important. You want to kind of put it in one space so you can look at it. The next is transcripts and gathering things that you might be able to do ahead of time. So for the Graduate School of Education, our applications opened on September 1st. And you have some time to put in your applications. But if you've just started your process, I always tell students to gather all the information you can ahead of time. So that is your transcripts, that's contacting your undergraduate institutions and getting copies of it. For our school, we accept an unofficial transcript to have your application reviewed. And then if you're admitted into the program, that's when we will request an official copy of your bachelor's transcript. But I always tell students, start getting those ahead of time just so you have it and it's easy to upload on the application. We allow you just to upload an unofficial copy directly. Some schools might require an official only, so that's going to take time. You want to do things that you can to get started early, such as updating your CV or your resume. Some programs might request this. I know in our school, it differs by program. Some do require a resume. Some say a resume is optional. I always tell students, if you have relevant work experience that can show the review committee that you have what it takes to be in this program, I always say if a resume is optional, to include that if you have relevant information, just to show what other skills that you might possess. It won't hinder your application at the Graduate School of Education. In fact, we encourage most of our students to do that if they can. The next is your personal statement. So we'll go further into that in the next slide, but get a second pair of eyes to review your personal statement and get someone that you trust who will be able to give you constructive criticism. What I mean by that is I personally wouldn't give my personal statement to my mom because she thinks everything that I write is perfect. So I might give it to someone else, like an advisor or a professor who will be able to give me that constructive criticism that I need. Next is a non-degree. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard of non-degree and what that means. But non-degree, say for example, you're not sure if you're ready for the program you're interested in, and you might want to take a class just to see what that program might be like. I always suggest non-degree. Non-degree means you're taking a class for credit, so you'll still be able to get a transcript that shows that course has been taken, but you're not in a matriculated program. So that's a good way to meet faculty in a program to get an idea of what the courses might be like. Say your undergrad GPA might have been a little low and you want to show that you're capable of graduate work, I suggest non-degree. So non-degree, however, does have a caveat. It doesn't qualify for financial aid. So students who do non-degree do have to do non-degree completely out of pocket and pay for it. A next way to prepare for graduate school is talking to alumni and mentors. So I always tell students you are welcome to connect with our alumni ambassadors. We do have a list we can connect you to get an idea of what the career side of it looks like, or maybe what it was like to be enrolled in our program, just to give you a feel if it's something that you would like. We have student ambassadors who are in current programs, such as Russell, who's joining us here today, who can also help you kind of get an idea of what it means to be a student in the Graduate School of Education. I always tell students it doesn't hurt to just connect to get a feel for it because the best people to give you advice on what it's like to be a student are other students. And finally, connect with an admissions representative. So you're already set with that. You're here in this webinar with me today. I'll send my contact information after today's presentation as well. So if you ever need any help while you're preparing for graduate school, use your resources and connect with me. So a big part of the graduate school process is your admission essay. In the Graduate School of Education, we call it the Statement of Education and Career Goals. But if you're applying to other schools, you might hear different names for this. It can be the statement of purpose, your goal statement, or your personal statement. It's pretty much going to describe certain things about you to the committee. So that is, why are you picking this particular school? So what about the school that you're applying to is important to you and will help you reach your goals? Why this particular program? So maybe you have a program in mind and you want to be specific about why you think this program is a good fit for you and how it will help you reach your goals. And not only that, but how will you be able to contribute to the program and the school as a student? One thing I always tell people about their admission essay is it's also a writing sample. So they will be mindful of any errors or grammatical errors that might be in your essay. So when you're writing this, please make sure you are getting a second opinion, that you're proofreading and you're writing multiple drafts so that it is to the best quality of a writing sample that you can provide. But faculty do weigh this heavily. It gives them an idea of who you are as a student, why you're interested in their program, and what you can bring to the table. Another important aspect of applying to graduate school is recommendations. So this can vary by department, by school, by program. Some of our programs, they require 3 letters of recommendation. So if you see a letter of recommendation on our program website, that means that you need to get a letter from a former professor or a professional that you have worked with in a working capacity. So it can't be a friend or family member. One thing about recommenders, at least at our school, is as part of the application, when you start an application, it will ask you to put the name and contact information of someone who's going to write you a letter of recommendation. We will then send them an email for them to upload the recommendation on your behalf. So we cannot accept letters of recommendation from students directly. That might differ at different schools or different departments, but at our school, we do take a letter of recommendation directly from the source. So make sure they have a good and valid email and that you're inputting that email properly so we can get that letter of recommendation for you. Next is before you ask your recommenders to have them as a recommender, make sure you are doing some things to help them write that letter for you. I always tell students, give them a copy of your resume, let them know what school and program you're applying to, and then give them guidance on what to include. So I always tell students, make sure they're including the support of your ability to succeed in that given program and that given career field. I have had the question, what do I do if I have been out of school for a while? I've seen that a lot, and that's perfectly okay. So the faculty understand that a lot of the students who apply to a graduate program could be adult learners, could be career changers, or just someone who's been out of school for some time. Any professional recommendation will suffice. So that can be a coworker, a supervisor. If you volunteer somewhere, it can be the volunteer coordinator that works at that site. So there are options. We do work with students if this is the case. If our application says you need a reference, that's different than a recommendation letter. So a reference, you would just put in the contact information. And if the faculty need to contact them, they will on their own. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, like I said, feel free to put it in the chat. If I'm going too fast, also let me know. Let me get back to the PowerPoint slide I was on. Perfect. So if you are an international student, which I did see someone in the chat is, so welcome to everyone who is joining us today. There are some additional requirements for international students. So at the Graduate School of Education, we require a copy of your passport biographical page. Depending on what country you are from, we need official test scores for English proficiency. So these are some of the test scores that we take, the TOEFL, the IELTS, the PTE. We now also take Duolingo. So if you have any questions about the Duolingo test, we do take Duolingo scores. You also need financial documentation and bank statements. So as an international graduate applicant, you must document the ability to pay for all costs incurred while studying in the U.S. Now, with that being said, financial documentation and bank statements are not needed for your application to be reviewed. So you'll see it on your application. You do not need it for your application to be considered by faculty. That's because it's only needed after a student has been academically admitted and funding decisions have been made. Once all of that happens, that's when we would need financial documentation and bank statements.
We do have one comment in the chat to your previous. Someone did request if you could go a little bit slower.
Yes, I can. Thank you for that, Russell.
Of course.
So yes, if you're an international applicant, the financial documentation and bank statements you do not need for your application. It's only needed after your application has been reviewed for admission consideration. It will still show up in your checklist as something that's missing. We do get emails about that. Unfortunately, we can't change the portal in that sense, but just know that it's there and know that we understand that it's there and that your application will still move forward for admission consideration. The next is a sample timeline for applying. So if you're a student who's applying to a program that has a deadline of January 1st, which a lot of our doctoral programs do, I do want to give you an example of what it would be like to kind of set some deadlines for yourself if you're applying for. One second, we do have some questions. So we do waive English proficiency test scores for some countries. It depends on the country. So when you're in the application, it won't show up if your country is a country that's listed. So for example, students from Ghana, they do not need to prove English proficiency, but the system will know exactly which country you are from. And if it's needed, it will be listed as needed. If you think you would qualify for a waiver, you would have to email us. So I'm going to put in the chat the email that you would submit that to. It's gse-apply@buffalo.edu. So if you're applying and you do have the English proficiency score as a requirement and you think you qualify for a waiver, I would definitely email our email address and we will review your application for a waiver request. You do need to have at least a started application with documentation for us to review that request. All righty. With that, I'll continue on. So as I was saying earlier, if you are applying with the January 1st deadline, this is a sample timeline that I would do. So usually I would suggest to reach out to your letters of recommendations earlier, by October 1st at the latest, and give them a deadline. I always tell students if the application deadline is January 1st, tell your recommender that it's really December 1st. And the reason I say that is because 9 times out of 10, what holds up an applicant's application is the missing letters of recommendation. And if you tell them December 1st, sometimes there's more wiggle room for them to submit it actually on time. Let's say, for instance, it's December 25th and January 1st is around the corner and your recommender is still missing. Just send us an email and we will call them and we will also email them asking if they can submit it in time. So we do work with students and we do work with your recommenders, but I always suggest to give them an earlier deadline just so you're not waiting on that when it comes time to submit and complete your application. I would make sure a draft of your personal statement is typically written by November 1st and that all of your transcripts and other information are uploaded to the portal by December 1st. Submit your application if you can. And by December 1st, you can always upload after you've submitted. You can add anything else you need to add to your application, even after it's been submitted. Again, send a reminder to your letters of recommendation if they haven't submitted them yet by December 1st, and then upload your personal statement and make sure everything is in by December 15th. That gives you wiggle room. There have been times where, let's say you submit your application and you think everything's perfectly okay and everything's ready to go, but we notice that a page of your transcript is missing. Or something was uploaded and it shows up as an error page. That gives us time as admissions representatives to reach out to you before the committee gets access to your application. So we want to make sure that you're applying with the best application that you can possibly apply with. And so we help you with that process, but we do suggest giving yourself time so that we can help you. If you get close to the deadline and you're missing documentation, sometimes your application will not be reviewed. The next is tuition and fee information. So I know that graduate school is a process and the cost of graduate school can be daunting. So we understand this is a very important piece when you're pursuing graduate school is understanding the cost. So tuition does vary by residency. What I mean by that is if you are an in-state or out-of-state student. International students have a different page as well. I'll go to that on the next slide, but this is for domestic U.S. Students. So if you are living in New York State right now, a full-time student pays about $7,265 a semester if they're full-time. If you're an out-of-state student, it's $14,105 if you're full-time. We also have a difference of tuition if you're an online versus out-of-state student, online in-state and online out-of-state. So it's all listed here. If you have any questions about tuition and fees, I'll make sure everyone gets a copy of this recording and the PowerPoint slide. So you can click on this link that takes you to the student accounts page. To be considered a New York State student, you have to have lived in New York State 12 months prior to the start of your program. For example, fall semester this past fall, it started in August, late August of 2024. So students had to submit documentation from August of 2023, showing that they were a New York State resident a year prior to their admission into the program. So that is something that we work with students. If you're admitted and you're selected, yes, I'm a New York State student on your application, we will help you go through the steps of verifying with the Office of Student Accounts. But it does have to be verified for you to get the in-state tuition.
Apologies. We do have some comments in the chat about opportunities for international students, as well as regarding transcripts and regarding transcripts.
Yeah, so we'll go to funding for international students and funding in general on the next slide. But for the question on do I need to have my transcript evaluated by WES, the answer is yes and no. It depends on the program. If you are applying to a New York State teaching program to get certified to teach in New York State, so for example, English education adolescents, early childhood education, any of our teacher programs, you do need to have your transcript evaluated by a WES organization or one like it. If you're applying to any of our other programs, so higher education, any of our doctoral programs, you do not need to have your transcript evaluated. It's only for the programs that lead to New York State teaching certification. Do you need a WES? That's a good question.
We have one more about deadlines for library science and online research.
Yeah, so for a student applying to information and library science, the deadline is November 1st if you're applying to spring. So if you're applying to spring 2025, that deadline is November 1st. That one, it should be listed on the webpage. If you scroll down to program overview, spring is November 1st. If you're interested in fall, I can get that information for you as we continue on. As for the other question, I see one here that says, regards to the statement of purpose, the department made it clear to tailor it to some 2 questions raised on their website. But yeah, so as I said earlier, the statement of purpose can change. Anything that's stated here can be different depending on the program or school you're applying to. The information that I provided on the statement of purpose is for a statement of purpose that's pretty general. So for example, our information and library science program, if you're applying to that one, if you look at the program requirements, it'll just say a statement of purpose showing your interest in the program. And students generally don't know what to write when that's very broad. So those are what I suggest. Why you're interested in the program, why you think the school is a good fit for you, and anything like that. Some programs will require you to write very specific things, and it'll be listed on their application requirements. For example, if you're applying to one of our teacher programs, they have clear and concise bullets that they want you to talk about that's listed on their application. So it will vary depending on the application, depending on the school that you're applying to. That's just to help students who get a very broad statement of purpose. As for your resume and CV, that will depend. Some programs do require you to list that. Again, it'll be in the application requirements listed on the website. Some will not. But if you think you have experience that can contribute to your application, I would include that. Going off of the statement of purpose, someone asked, is there a word limit? That's going to depend. Some programs will say there is a word limit. Some programs will say you have to write 1,000 words. Some will give no page limit. If there's no page limit, I always tell students to try to get to a page, page and a half. That seems to be the typical number for programs to write, but usually it's listed, and if it's not listed, I would aim for that. So all great questions. And with that, I'm going to proceed a little bit further. And as we go on, feel free to keep asking questions. I'll also have a Q&A portion at the end of today's presentation. Now, if you're an international student, you do have to document the full cost of only the first year of study. And that's so that you can get your I-20 issued. So right now, this is what's listed for 2024, the estimated budget for international graduate students. So right now, tuition and fees is about $30,000. Room and board is about $22,000. So the estimated total is $52,900. Like I said earlier, you do not have to prove the cost or provide financial documentation until you've been admitted and until funding decisions have been made. So you do not have to apply to a separate application for funding. If you're applying to a doctoral program specifically, I do want to point out there is a difference. If you're applying to a PhD program, you are automatically considered for funding. That includes all international students, all domestic students. All of our students are considered for funding at the PhD level. That's because a lot of our PhD students get graduate assistantships where you have to work 20 hours a week. And then in return for that, you're given like tuition benefits and all that. So I will put in the chat our funding page so you can get more information about funding. It does change if you're a master's student. So if you're a master level program, a lot of our funding is limited to scholarships, and usually the student has to apply for those scholarships on their own after they've been admitted into a program. So I will put in the chat after today's presentation concludes our funding page, as well as our scholarship portal, if you're a master's student looking to apply for any funds. As you know, with graduate school, there are additional costs to consider. So I just want to give a friendly reminder of what those costs could be as a student. And this will depend on your program as well. So each program is different, but you could have books and other materials. Typically, core courses do have some sort of textbook that's required. Not all courses might even have textbooks. Others might be journal articles that they upload for you, so you don't have to purchase those. It will depend on the program. You usually get that information once you're admitted, once you have your program of study. It'll show you which classes you have to take, and usually you're able to get that information from your advisor. The next is housing. So this may not be applicable to everyone. If you're looking to live on campus or off campus, that's totally up to you as a student. You'll go through that process on your own. If you're interested in on-campus housing, applications usually open around January or so, and they close around May. So you do have some time once you're admitted. Most of our students will be admitted ahead of time, and they're able to apply for any on-campus housing. It's not a guarantee for all, but if you are interested, you can apply for it and hope that you receive it.
We have two new questions in the chat. The first dealing with application fee waivers, and the second about available graduate research assistantships in the university.
Perfect. So for application fee waivers, because the graduate school in general is very big, application fee waivers do have to be submitted to Central Graduate School. If you think you qualify for a waiver or deserve a waiver, you do have to submit your application first, and then email us once your application is complete or submitted, at least that you're interested in a waiver. We will then submit your application to Central Graduate School to help process that request. It's up to the graduate school, the central office of graduate school, to provide students with application fee waivers. So that's the process for it. As for graduate research assistantships, they vary. If a student's applying to a doctoral program, you would typically be awarded a graduate assistantship, depending on the program you're applying to and who your advisor is. So that process is usually done after the admissions process. Like I said, for the application fee waiver, it depends on the student. We do give out application fee waivers. We have in the past international students and domestic students. It's really based on your application and the central graduate school office. So I can't confirm or deny what would get students qualified for that. You would have to submit your application and then put in a request.
And were there any needed documents?
There's not. It's based on your application. As for the higher education and student affairs program, students in that program are automatically considered for graduate assistantships. That's the only master's program that has a graduate assistantship built into it. That's the higher education student affairs program. As for the other master's programs, you are able to apply to any graduate assistantships available throughout the university, but that would be something the student has to do. You have to be admitted first to a program. That's because the UB has a graduate assistantship portal called UB Handshake or Bullseye, and you're able to apply for any graduate assistantships that are university-wide. The higher education student affairs program, you do not need a WES evaluation. It's registered with New York State, but you're not becoming a New York State public school K-12 teacher. So that one you do not need a WES evaluation for. Okay, sorry about that. Back to additional costs to consider. So the next thing to consider is transportation and travel. So if you're an out-of-state student, now you have to come into New York State and reside in Buffalo. That's going to come with some cost. If you don't have like a car or anything like that, and you're worried about transportation while you're here, we do have shuttles all around campus, shuttles that take you to different campuses, shuttles that take you off campus to go to grocery shopping if you have to get grocery shopping done, take you to the UB Health Center if you have to go there. It goes to the mall as well. It'll take you downtown. So we do have different options depending on where you're trying to go around campus. We do try to help provide transportation to the best that we can. Next is conferences, professional associations, anything like that. So these are great ways to get involved. Some programs might help you with your conference, but that does typically come at the cost of the student. And lastly, we have licensure, examinations, and credentials. So these are very specific for some of our teacher students, as well as our counseling programs. So for our teacher students, you do have to apply and pay for your own licensure. And our counseling programs, for example, like mental health counseling, you do have to pay for your licensure and examinations as well. So I see in the chat we have some additional questions about financing your graduate school and some options. So this will be a good slide to go off of that. As for graduate assistantships with health insurance and anything like that, I'm going to put in the chat this week we are having a webinar specifically on financing graduate school and the different ways that you can finance it with graduate assistantships. That will not be ran by me, but that individual will be able to help answer those questions a little bit better for you. So I don't want to steer you wrong, and I want to be able to get you the resources that you need. So I will drop that in the chat after today's presentation. But for now, for financing your graduate school, there are types of aids. So we have two types of federal direct loans. So we have the federal direct unsubsidized loan. With an unsubsidized loan, you are responsible for the interest from the moment the loan money is dispersed into your account. So this is essentially a loan that has interest that builds. The next is the federal graduate plus loan. So the graduate plus loan or grad plus loan is the type of federal student loan that is designed so you can get a loan for the entire amount of your education. So it's not a fixed amount like the unsubsidized one. You're kind of given a pretty big amount to cover the full cost. Those are types of financial aid. We do not help you with the financial aid process. Unfortunately, we are unable to. You would have to fill out the FAFSA and work with the financial aid office directly to get assistance with that information. At the graduate level, I do know a student has to be enrolled in a minimum of 6 credits to be considered for financial aid. Next is institution scholarships, fellowships, and assistantships. So we'll talk about that next on the next slide. But you can also apply for any outside scholarships. So our outside scholarships That will be, of course, on the own student's time. If you're an employee, so if you work for UUP or any other SUNY institution like UB, there are tuition remission perks through UUP. It will depend. We do get a question on, can I do a payment plan if I'm financing my graduate school? And the answer is yes, you can. If you're doing the payment plan, you would have to work with students' accounts. So UB offers up to 5 payment plan dates. So you can select if you want to have anywhere from 1 to 5 different payments spread out.
We have a
I
few.
do.
Sorry.
Yeah, I do see some questions in the chat, and I will get to them because they're very specific for some of the students. So I'm going to leave those ones here, and I'm going to get to them in like 4 minutes for you guys. Alrighty. So I do see a lot of your questions are about financing, so that's why I want to just go to this slide because I know it would help, and it's how do I apply for these funds? So most scholarships and assistantships and fellowships are awarded directly through your application. So there's no additional essays or materials that you have to write that are required. Your application is considered for admission consideration and then considered for funding opportunities. Once accepted, students are communicated about funding opportunities unique to their program. So acceptance letters are sent out first, and then you will receive funding options. Doctoral programs are eligible for full funding. However, not all accepted doctoral students will receive full funding packages. If you do receive full funding, it will include a stipend, tuition remission, and a position as a graduate assistantship or research assistantship. If you do get accepted and don't get full funding right off the bat, that's okay. It may be possible to potentially pursue a research position with your faculty advisor if they have a grant, for example, or anything like that once you're in the program. I should also mention here that full funding does not apply to EDD programs. So if you're applying to LTSC, which is our Learning and Teaching and Social Context EDD, or our Educational Administration EDD, those are not considered for funding opportunities because they are considered professional programs. So at most, you might be able to obtain a tuition waiver through an employment or other scholarship option, but it's not considered for full funding. UB Bullseye is available as a resource for scholarships as well. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're a student at the master's level, for example, and you're looking to get a graduate assistantship, you would do so at this link right here, which is the UB Bullseye link. You do have to be an admitted student, and then you can apply for assistantships that are university-wide. Lastly, I'm just going to give a couple tips and tips for going to grad school before we open it up to the Q&A portion. But I do want to say if you're applying to a doctoral program, a PhD program, reach out to the faculty that you are interested in working with. I always tell students, just send them an email, let them know that you're interested in their research, you think that their research aligns with yours, and will they consider you a good fit for the program? It's typically a good way to get your name out there because usually at the PhD level, it is a review committee, so a lot of the faculty will meet to discuss these applications. At the master's level, you do not need to reach out to a faculty member to find an advisor. You are automatically assigned one upon acceptance. So I do get the question, do I still have to reach out to them? And the answer is no, not at the master's level, you do not. It's automatically assigned. At the doctoral level, you also don't really have to reach out to them if you don't want to. It's just a suggestion at the doctoral level. I always tell students to engage with their UB community. So we offer a ton of ways to get involved with our faculty to read their research. You can get the UB statement that we offer every month, our monthly newsletter, to learn more about our faculty, what they're doing in their research interest. Also with that, learn about your field. So see what professional organizations are out there for your program or your field. You want to talk to graduate students. We have so many student ambassadors this year that are wonderful and so willing to help. So reach out to them. Reach out to your references early. Remember that if you can take one thing out of here, it's reach out to your letters of recommendation early so you can get it in on time. And lastly, my last tip of advice will be start your application and submit as early as possible so you have wiggle room for us to help. Awesome. So here are just some resources available to you at the Graduate School of Education. So we have the Center for Excellence in Writing. This is open to current UB students and UB alumni. They help you with your writing. They're amazing. They're an amazing resource, especially If you are a doctoral student, they will also help you. They have doctoral writing retreats for your dissertation, so they're a great option for you. There's also the Career Design Center. They help with job interviewing, writing your resume. We have the Health and Wellness Center, which offers workshops, counseling, and health services. Then we have the UB Information Technology, so they will help you with any of your technology needs. We have additional resources. So if you're a veteran student and you need access to your veteran services, you'll go through their office for anything like that. Here is a link to resources for new students in the Graduate School of Education, and then, of course, a link to international student resources. So with that being said, I will finish off the last slide, which is One KPIN. One KPIN is where you can get access to everything that you need as a student, such as financial aid, UB cards, student accounts, parking and transportation, registrar, and health insurance. So I will make sure everyone gets a copy of this PowerPoint so you can click on all these links and learn about our different resources on campuses. I would say One KPIN, if you have any hard questions like what's my account going to be like, what's billing like, when should I apply for financial aid, it would be in the office of One KPIN. And with that, this is my information, so I can always be reached at the Graduate School of Education, which is our gse-info@buffalo.edu email. And then my phone number is 716-645-2110. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I see we have some questions in the chat, and I can help answer all the questions that we will have. So let me just see here. Today's presentation is being recorded, so if you don't want to see yourself on screen, feel free to turn your video off, but if you don't care about that, feel free to have it on. So it looks like we did have a lot of questions about the cost of the application. So our applications are $50. Unfortunately, I cannot get application fee waivers out for joining the webinar. Again, our application fee waiver process is you have to submit an application and then email us that you want a waiver request, and we will submit your application for one. In the meantime, I'm going to put in the chat our funding page. So our funding page will tell you exactly which programs offer full funding to students. And what the funding offers. So I also would suggest if you have any questions about funding, and the process of what it means to get funding or anything like that, to attend our webinar coming up. So we do have a webinar. Let me get the exact date for you. We have a webinar on September 26th from 6 to 7 p.m. So same time. It's going over funding for graduate school. So it'll go through that whole process, what it means to get funding, what is included in the funding package, anything like that. So that is the link here. And if you aren't able to attend, but you still register, that's what I recommend doing because you'll still get a copy of the recording. So you'll have all that information about funding. Someone asked, can you apply directly to a doctoral program without a master's? That depends on the program. Some programs will require a master's. For example, our higher education doctoral program requires you to have a master's before applying to the doctoral program. The only master's program that has a graduate assistantship embedded in the program is our higher education and student affairs program. And I'm also going to stop the recording so we can continue on with the Q&A and have this recording ready for students for tomorrow.